I used to believe marriage was about growing together. That night at my cousin Kyle's wedding, as Jessica cornered me against the reception hall wall, her breath hot with expensive champagne, I realized how wrong I had been. Do not open your mouth tonight. Do not talk to anyone. Do not try to be funny, and for God's sake, stop looking like you do not belong in your own skin. I nodded, swallowing the familiar lump of shame. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt invisible in your own life. Growing up in Boston, I never quite felt like I measured up. My parents were good people but emotionally distant. A pat on the back or good job was rare currency in our household. Dad was always working, Mom always worried about appearances. They provided well, but praise was scarce. I learned early that accomplishments were expected, not celebrated. Art became my escape. While other kids played sports, I filled sketchbooks with drawings that my parents politely acknowledged before asking about my math grades. High school was a blur of feeling like the odd one, out never quite fitting in with any particular crowd, but finding moments of belonging when teachers recognized my creative eye. College was where I finally started to breathe. The graphic design program at Boston University felt like finding my tribe. For the first time, my tendency to see the world differently was an asset, not a liability. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a respectable marketing firm. Success came steadily, if not spectacularly. I designed campaigns that clients loved but always felt there was something missing, some deeper fulfillment that eluded me. When colleagues went for drinks after work, I tagged along but usually ended up observing more than participating. My apartment was comfortable but sparse, my social circle, small but loyal. At 32, I had built a life that was perfectly adequate, yet I carried this nagging sensation that I was somehow performing my life rather than living it. Then Jessica walked into the industry mixer 5 years ago, and everything changed. She stood out immediately, not just because of her striking looks, but the effortless way she commanded attention. Her laugh carried across the room, drawing people to her like moths to flame. When she approached me to comment on a campaign of mine her pharmaceutical company had used, I fumbled over my words, certain she would quickly move on to someone more interesting. But she did not. Instead, she asked questions about my creative process, seeming genuinely interested in my answers. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. I was certain she would never call. She did the very next day. That first date led to a second, then a third. Each time I marveled at how someone like her could be interested in someone like me. Jessica came from old money with a family name that opened doors. She had degrees from Princeton and Wharton, a corner office with a view of the Boston Harbor, and a social circle that included people whose names appeared in the society pages. "You are refreshingly real," she told me early on. "Everyone in my world is so fake, so concerned with appearances. You do not care about any of that." I took it as a compliment then. I did not understand it was actually the first assessment of a project she was undertaking. The first year was intoxicating. Jessica introduced me to restaurants where the menu had no prices, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, and parties where I shook hands with politicians and CEOs. When she suggested I try a different hairstyle or brought me a shirt she thought would bring out my eyes, I was flattered by her attention to detail. When she corrected my pronunciation of charcuterie or gently kicked my foot when I used the wrong fork, I was grateful for her guidance in a world I had never navigated before. "You have so much potential," she would say, squeezing my hand. "You just need a little polishing." The proposal came as a surprise, not because I did not love her, but because a part of me still could not believe someone like her would choose someone like me. The ring was her grandmother's, a family heirloom that her mother presented to me with a tight smile and instructions about the proper way to propose. "Jessica deserves a fairy tale," her mother said, eyeing me with barely concealed doubt. The engagement party was at her parents' estate in Cambridge. I spent the entire evening trying to remember the names and connections of everyone I met, aware of Jessica monitoring my interactions from across the room. Later that night, she provided a detailed critique of my conversational missteps and awkward moments. "When you tell that story about your first design job, you talk with your hands too much," she said, demonstrating what she meant, in an exaggerated way that made me flush with embarrassment. "And please stop mentioning your uncle's auto body shop. Nobody here can relate to that." By the time we married at the Boston Public Library, Jessica had upgraded my wardrobe, corrected my speech patterns, curated my social media presence, and subtly distanced me from friends she deemed unsuitable. I convinced myself this was what growth looked like in a relationship, that her guidance was making me better, more refined, more worthy of her. The day after our honeymoon, reality settled in. Without the wedding to plan, Jessica seemed restless, as if searching for a new project. She found it in the continued renovation of me. Comments that had once been framed as helpful suggestions became direct criticisms. Do you have to laugh so loudly? Can you not tell stories about your childhood? They make people uncomfortable. That shirt makes you look like you are trying too hard. I began second-guessing every word, every gesture, constantly monitoring myself for potential mistakes. Dinners with her family became exercises in anxiety with her father, asking pointed questions about my career advancement, and her mother offering backhanded compliments about how much I had improved under Jessica's influence. Jessica never defended me, often joining in with additional critiques after her third glass of wine. When the invitation arrived for my cousin Kyle's wedding, I felt a surge of genuine excitement. Kyle and I had been close as kids before college and careers pulled us in different directions. His fiancée Amanda seemed warm and unpretentious from the few times we had met. A weekend celebrating their love surrounded by my family sounded like exactly what I needed. Jessica's reaction was immediate concern. "What will you wear? Please tell me you will let me handle that. Your family is so loud. Remember to keep your voice down. Do they expect us to stay the whole weekend? I have that charity auction Sunday." The shopping trip for wedding attire became yet another reminder of my inadequacies. Everything I liked was too casual or trying too hard, or not appropriate for the venue. After hours in high-end stores, Jessica selected a suit that felt like a costume, something the real Brendan would never choose. "Trust me," she said when I hesitated. "I know it looks good on you better than you do." The rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding was my first warning that something was truly wrong. As I reconnected with aunts, uncles, and cousins I had not seen in years, I felt moments of my old self resurfacing. I told jokes that made my Uncle Larry spill his beer laughing. I reminisced about childhood hijinks with Kyle that had the table in stitches. Jessica's face grew increasingly rigid throughout the meal. When I reached for a dinner roll, she placed her hand over mine, redirecting me to the correct bread plate. When I was mid-story about Kyle's disastrous first attempt at driving, she interrupted to correct a detail, effectively killing the momentum. By dessert, her foot was pressed firmly against mine, a silent warning to rein myself in. In the hotel elevator afterward, she was icily silent. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Do you enjoy embarrassing me?" she replied. "You were acting like some attention-starved teenager." Your laugh was echoing across the entire restaurant. And that story about stealing your dad's car was completely inappropriate in mixed company. I spent the rest of the night apologizing, promising to do better at the actual wedding. As I finally drifted off to sleep, a small voice inside me wondered when spending time with my own family had become something I needed to apologize for. The morning of Kyle's wedding, I woke to find Jessica already up, hair and rollers, face covered in some expensive green mask that smelled like seaweed and money. She barely acknowledged me as I shuffled to the bathroom, immediately criticizing the stubble I had missed under my jaw. "Are you even trying anymore?" she sighed, reaching up to roughly turn my face toward the light. "I swear sometimes it feels like I am dressing a child for picture day." While I showered, I could hear her on the phone with her friend Stephanie, their voices carrying over the running water. "No, we are still here at this wedding, in the middle of nowhere. The rehearsal dinner was exactly what you would expect. His family is just so ordinary. You should have seen him trying so hard to be the funny guy everyone loves. It was painful to watch." I stood under the hot water longer than necessary, letting it drown out her words, the knot in my stomach tightening. By the time I emerged, she was applying her makeup with scientific precision, phone on speaker, with another friend. "I have to go. The husband needs constant supervision, or he will show up looking like he slept in his clothes. Talk later." The drive to the venue was tense, filled with last-minute instructions that felt more like threats. "Remember, 2-drink maximum. You get loud after 3. If anyone asks about work, keep it simple. No one wants to hear about the creative process. Please try to stand up straight. Your posture makes you look insecure." With each directive, I felt myself shrinking, folding inward, rehearsing the acceptable version of myself I was expected to present. By the time we arrived at the beautiful lakeside venue, I was mentally exhausted before the event had even begun. The ceremony itself was a brief respite. Watching Kyle, my childhood partner in crime, pledge his love to Amanda brought genuine emotion. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, their joy palpable. I felt a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with anxiety as they sealed their union with a kiss that made the crowd erupt in cheers and applause. Jessica dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, her performance of emotion flawless yet empty. As we filed out for the cocktail hour, she gripped my arm with punishing fingers. "That was lovely, but please pull yourself together. Your emotions are showing all over your face." The cocktail reception should have been enjoyable, a chance to catch up with family members I rarely saw. But Jessica shadowed me like a prison guard, steering me away from conversations she deemed getting too rowdy, or interrupting to answer questions directed at me. When my Aunt Susan asked about my latest design projects, Jessica smoothly interjected. "Brendan is so modest about his work. The firm has him working on some pharmaceutical campaigns that are really quite basic, but he does what he can with them." The dismissal stung, especially since I had recently won an industry award for that very campaign, something Jessica had been too busy to attend. I caught Kyle watching our interaction, his brow furrowed in confusion at the dynamics he was witnessing. As guests began moving into the reception hall for dinner, Jessica excused herself to the ladies' room. Kyle immediately approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Everything okay, man? You seem different." Before I could respond, Jessica reappeared, looping her arm through mine with a territorial smile at Kyle. "Your bride looks absolutely stunning, Kyle. You must be so proud." Kyle's eyes lingered on me for a moment longer before he nodded and returned to Amanda's side. The missed connection felt like a physical ache. The seating arrangements placed us at a table with distant relatives I barely knew rather than with my closer family members at the head table. Jessica expressed relief. "Thank God we are not stuck listening to your uncle's fishing stories all night." I picked at my meal appetite, diminished by the constant vigilance required to monitor my behavior. Jessica chatted amiably with the older couple across from us, presenting the polished version of our life together that existed only in her narration. It was during the brief lull between dinner and dancing that it happened. I had excused myself to use the restroom, and upon returning was stopped by my teenage cousin, who wanted to show me her artwork on her phone. I was genuinely impressed by her talent, and told her so, feeling a flash of my authentic self in the interaction. I did not see Jessica approaching until she was beside me, glass of champagne in hand, eyes glacial, despite her fixed smile. "Darling, could I borrow you for a moment?" She steered me away from my young cousin, her fingernails digging into my arm as she maneuvered me into a quiet corner of the reception hall. That was when she cornered me against the wall, her breath hot with expensive champagne, and delivered the words that would ultimately change everything. "Do not open your mouth tonight. Do not talk to anyone. Do not try to be funny. And for God's sake, stop looking like you do not belong in your own skin." I nodded, swallowing the familiar lump of shame, but something shifted inside me. A tiny spark of rebellion flickered in the darkness of my compliance. The moment that truly broke something irreparable came during the family toast. Kyle's father had just finished a heartfelt speech about love and partnership that left few dry eyes in the room. The photographer called for a group photo of Kyle's extended family, and I naturally moved toward the gathering, having been included in these photos my entire life. Jessica's hand clamped around my wrist like a vice, yanking me backward with surprising strength. Her voice was low but distinct enough that those nearby could clearly hear. "This is for family, not whatever you are." The silence that followed was excruciating. The photographer hesitated, camera lowered, clearly unsure how to proceed. Kyle's mother glanced between Jessica and me, confusion and concern warring on her face. Several cousins exchanged uncomfortable looks. Kyle himself took a half step forward, but Amanda gently touched his arm, the universal signal of not now. The moment passed. The photograph was taken. I stood alone at the edge of the dance floor, watching my family pose without me feeling as though I had been erased from my own history. Jessica rejoined me moments later, acting as though nothing had happened. But people had noticed. For the remainder of the reception, I caught sympathetic glances, awkward attempts at inclusion, that Jessica efficiently thwarted, and the distinct sensation that others were seeing the truth of my situation, perhaps before I fully understood it myself. By the time we returned to our hotel room, I was emotionally numb, operating on autopilot. Jessica kicked off her heels, complaining about the DJ's song selections and the quality of the wine. When her phone rang, she answered it on speaker as she began removing her makeup. "God, finally done with this nightmare wedding," she told her friend. "You would not believe how embarrassing the whole thing was. Cash bar after 10, if you can imagine." "How did Brendan do?" her friend asked with a laugh that suggested this was a regular topic of conversation. "Did he manage not to completely humiliate you?" Jessica glanced toward the bathroom where I stood, brushing my teeth, clearly assuming I could not hear over the running water. Oh, the usual disaster. He stood there like some ugly decoration nobody asked for. At one point, they tried to include him in the family photos. Can you believe it? As if he belongs in their family albums. Her friend's laughter felt like shards of glass. "What did you do?" "Pulled him out, obviously. I am not having his awkward hovering ruin their wedding photos. The photographer actually had the nerve to look shocked. Whatever. I need a real drink after this day. Room service has a decent scotch, at least." I turned off the water, a strange calm washing over me. In that moment, listening to my wife mock my very existence to her friend, something crystallized. This was not love. This had never been love. This was ownership, control, and cruelty, dressed up as refinement. I emerged from the bathroom, and Jessica quickly switched her phone off speaker, wrapping up the call with fake sweetness when she realized I had heard everything. "Early start tomorrow, right, honey?" she said, testing, to see if I would confront her. I simply smiled and nodded, which visibly unnerved her more than anger would have. For the first time in our relationship, I felt a strange power in my silence, in the knowledge spreading through me like a sunrise that this would be the last time she would speak to me this way. The drive home the next morning was unusually quiet. Typically, Jessica would fill the 3-hour journey with a detailed critique of every interaction, every perceived misstep or social failing on my part. This time I offered no openings, responding to her attempts at conversation with minimal answers. That centerpiece was a bit much, do not you think? Amanda's dress was pretty, though not what I would have chosen. Sure. Are you giving me the silent treatment, really? How mature. I glanced at her briefly, just tired. My calmness clearly unsettled her. Jessica was accustomed to provoking reactions, engineering emotional responses, that left me apologizing, explaining, or defending myself. My quiet detachment offered her no purchase, no familiar pattern to exploit. By the time we reached our Boston brownstone, her irritation had evolved into concern. She watched with increasing alarm as I methodically unpacked, sorted the laundry, and then began filling a suitcase with clothes and essential personal items. "What are you doing?" Her voice held a note I had never heard before. Uncertainty. "I need some time to think." My voice sounded different too. Steady, determined. "About what?" "Do not be ridiculous. If this is about last night, you are overreacting." I was just stressed. I continued packing, selecting items with calm deliberation. My sketchbooks, the watch my grandfather had left me, the photo albums from before I met Jessica. Her approach shifted rapidly from dismissal to anger. "You cannot just leave. Where would you even go? You have no one but me." When that produced no response, she transitioned seamlessly to tears, a performance I had seen work effectively on waiters, ticket agents, and her father. "Brendan, please. I love you. I am sorry if I hurt your feelings. I will do better." I zipped the suitcase and finally looked at her directly. "I am staying with Kyle for a few days. I will let you know my next steps." The stunned expression on her face almost made me waver. 5 years of conditioning did not dissolve in a single night. But the memory of her voice speaking about me, as though I were an embarrassing pet rather than her husband, strengthened my resolve. I called a rideshare from the street, ignoring the texts that immediately began flooding my phone. Kyle and Amanda, back early from their mini honeymoon, welcomed me without questions, offering their guest room for as long as you need, man. That first night, sitting on their patio with a beer, Kyle finally asked, "How long has she been treating you like that?" The question broke something open. Words poured out, 5 years of increasing criticism, isolation, and shame tumbling forth like water through a broken dam. Kyle listened without interruption, his expression moving from shock to anger to deep concern. "Brendan, that is not love, man. That is abuse." The word landed like a physical blow. Abuse. I had always associated that term with bruises, with violence. not with the slow erosion of identity, the gradual destruction of self-worth, through thousands of cutting comments and cruel dismissals. The next day, I found a therapist who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. Dr. Winters listened to my halting description of my marriage and nodded with understanding rather than judgment. What you are describing follows a classic pattern of emotional abuse and control. The isolation from friends and family, the constant criticism, the public humiliation, the erosion of your confidence and identity. None of this is your fault, Brendan. Those sessions became the foundation of my rebuilding. With each meeting, I recognized more clearly how systematically Jessica had dismantled my sense of self, replacing it with her narrative of my inadequacy and her generosity in tolerating me despite my supposed flaws. Meanwhile, old friends emerged from the woodwork, reaching out after seeing social media posts from Kyle's wedding, where I was notably separate from Jessica. Their messages expressed concern, offers of support, and in some cases, admissions that they had stepped back because Jessica had made it clear they were unwelcome in our lives. She told us you wanted space from your immature college friends, my former roommate Tim explained over coffee. We figured you had outgrown us. 2 weeks into my separation, I secured an apartment in Cambridge close enough to work, but in a neighborhood Jessica would never visit. I bought furniture I actually liked, rather than the designer-approved pieces that filled our home. I reconnected with former colleagues, and even reached out to a competing agency that had tried to recruit me years earlier. To my surprise, they were still interested. Their creative director remembered my work and offered me a senior position with more creative freedom and better compensation than my current role. For the first time in years, I felt valued for my actual talents rather than how well I could conform to someone else's expectations. The final step was the hardest. With my therapist's guidance, I drafted a detailed letter to Jessica documenting the pattern of abuse and control in our relationship. I explained that I would be filing for divorce and that all future communication would be through attorneys. I described, factually, without emotion, specific incidents of public humiliation, private cruelty, and systematic isolation that characterized our marriage. After sending the letter via certified mail, I changed my phone number, informed my workplace security about potential unwanted visits, and waited. The response came faster than expected. On a rainy Tuesday evening, exactly 2 weeks after the wedding incident, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica makeup artfully smudged to suggest tears holding a small gift bag, the picture of penitence. I opened the door but did not invite her in. She blinked in surprise at my calm demeanor. "Brendan, please. Can we talk? I have been worried sick." "There is nothing to discuss, Jessica. The attorneys will handle everything from here." Her performance intensified, tears flowing more convincingly now. "How can you throw away 5 years over one bad night?" I was stressed. I had too much champagne. It did not mean anything. It was not one night. It was 5 years of constant criticism and control. 5 years of you systematically destroying my confidence and isolating me from everyone who actually cared about me. She switched tactics, moving from contrition to minimization. "Everyone has issues in marriage. You are being overly sensitive. Remember how lost you were when we met. Look at everything I have done for you." When that failed to penetrate, she attempted anger. "You will never find anyone else who will put up with your issues. Do you think you are some great catch? Without me, you are nothing." I felt a strange calm, watching these rapid transitions, seeing clearly for the first time the manipulation that had once seemed like love. "Is that why you are here, Jessica? Because you think I am nothing without you? Or is it because your friends think dumping me makes you look bad?" Her expression flickered a momentary break in the performance that told me I had hit the mark. I continued. "Or maybe it is because the story of your charity case, husband leaving you, does not fit the narrative you have created for your perfect life." Her composure cracked completely then. "They all think I am some kind of monster. Stephanie asked if the stories were true, if I really pulled you out of family photos and mocked you to my friends. Your trashy family is spreading lies about me." I could not help it. I laughed. A genuine, spontaneous laugh of pure relief. "Thank you for confirming that your concern is entirely about your image, not about me or our marriage." She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In many ways she was. The Brendan who would have apologized for her behavior, who would have accepted blame to smooth things over, who would have done anything to earn back her approval, was gone. "You will regret this," she said, her voice cold. When the novelty of independence wears off, you will realize what you threw away. I shook my head, still smiling slightly. Goodbye, Jessica. As I closed the door on her stunned face, I felt the last pieces of her control dissolving. The man who had stood silent and ashamed, at the edge of a dance floor watching his family photograph a moment he had been deemed unworthy to share, was being replaced by someone new. Or perhaps someone long forgotten now, finding his way home. 6 months passed in what felt like both an instant and a lifetime. My new apartment became a true home filled with art. I loved furniture chosen for comfort, rather than status, and friends who dropped by without judgment or agenda. The walls featured my own photography, and designs alongside pieces from artist friends Jessica had dismissed as amateur. The divorce proceedings moved forward without drama, thanks to the ironclad prenuptial agreement Jessica's family had insisted upon, believing they were protecting her assets from a fortune hunter. That document, intended to shield her wealth, ultimately provided me a clean break I might not otherwise have achieved. My new position at the competing agency brought creative challenges and recognition that rebuilt my professional confidence. My first major campaign won an industry award, which my new colleagues celebrated with genuine enthusiasm. The creative director made a point of mentioning my unique perspective as the campaign's greatest strength, a stark contrast to Jessica's constant attempts to smooth away my individuality. Family relationships healed and deepened. Kyle and Amanda became regular visitors, often bringing other cousins who expressed regret at losing touch during my marriage. My parents, seeing the change in me, awkwardly but sincerely acknowledged their role in setting the stage for my acceptance of Jessica's treatment. "We should have told you more often how proud we were," my father said during a Sunday dinner. "Maybe then you would have known you deserved better." Dating again seemed daunting at first. My therapist encouraged me to take it slowly, to establish clear boundaries and watch carefully for red flags I had previously ignored. I met Sarah, an elementary school art teacher, at a community painting class. I joined to reclaim my creative hobbies. Our connection developed naturally, without pressure or performance metrics, built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation of each other's authentic selves. Looking back on the wreckage of my marriage, patterns emerged with painful clarity. The way Jessica had isolated me from friends and family who might have noticed the abuse. How she undermined my confidence while positioning herself as my savior. The public humiliations designed to reinforce my dependence on her approval. The constant moving of goalposts, ensuring I could never quite measure up no matter how I changed myself. Red flags I had interpreted as love were now glaringly obvious. Her initial fascination with fixing me presented as seeing my potential. The way she positioned herself as the authority on everything from my clothing to my personality. How she reframed her controlling behavior as helpful guidance. The subtle and not so subtle ways she communicated that I was lucky she had chosen me, implying no one else would want me as I was. The physical symptoms of living under constant criticism had vanished as well. The persistent knot in my stomach before social events. The tension headaches after family gatherings. The insomnia spent reviewing every word and gesture for potential missteps. My body had been telling me what my mind refused to acknowledge, that I was living in a state of constant stress and fear. My healing journey was neither linear nor simple. There were days I questioned my decision moments. I found myself slipping into old patterns of self-doubt and people-pleasing. Recovery became a practice rather than a destination, supported by therapy, reconnection with authentic relationships, and deliberate cultivation of self-trust. I relearned how to have opinions without apology. Discovered preferences I had suppressed or forgotten existed. Found joy in small choices made freely, from ordering what I actually wanted in restaurants to wearing clothes that expressed rather than disguised my personality. The most unexpected outcome of hitting rock bottom was discovering it could become a foundation. Every shattered piece of my former life became material for building something authentic and strong. Each painful revelation about the nature of my marriage provided insight that helped me establish healthier patterns. The lesson that finally brought peace was not about Jessica or even about relationships, but about belonging. I had spent my life seeking permission to exist in spaces, apologizing for the room I occupied, grateful for approval from anyone willing to grant it. The greatest freedom came in realizing I belonged to myself first, that worthiness was my birthright, rather than something earned through constant shifting to meet others' expectations. Forgiveness came too, not because Jessica deserved it, but because I needed to release the anger that tied me to the past. I did not forgive to free her from accountability, but to free myself from carrying the weight of what she had done. Her actions would always remain her responsibility, but my healing was mine alone. If you are watching this and recognize your own relationship in my story, please know you are not alone. The voice telling you that you are overreacting, too sensitive, or lucky to be tolerated is not the voice of love. True love expands rather than diminishes, celebrates rather than criticizes, and sees you fully without requiring your disappearance. Sometimes the bravest choice is walking away from something that was never really yours to begin with toward the person you were always meant to be. I lost a marriage but found myself, and that has made all the difference. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt you had to change who you are to be accepted? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding strength after betrayal. Your support helps others know they are not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember you deserve to belong exactly as you are.